As you have questions, we'd like you to type them into the box that says questions, and we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dana Baldwin. Dana brings more than 30 years of business experience, and he has held senior management positions including chairman, CEO, COO in mid-sized companies. He is familiar with all functional areas, having also served in sales, management, production, and engineering. Dana has a Master's of Management from Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. His critical thinking skills have been well developed and honed with nearly 15 years of experience leading companies through the simplified strategic planning process. Dana has managed 2 different machine tool companies, coming up through the ranks from a beginning engineer to becoming chairman, president, and CEO of one company. He then joined a startup company that had purchased a product line from his original company. He was instrumental in establishing the new firm as a leader in the market. Dana actively leads strategic planning and has done this with over 100 companies in a wide variety of industries. Dana became interested in succession planning while at his family's company, where he realized there was no formal plan to develop talent within the company and that family members were not held to the same standards as in other family-run businesses. His interests have grown over the years as he's helped many companies in their strategic planning efforts and because succession planning needs to be a part of strategic planning. He has written a number of articles on succession planning, and this webinar is an outgrowth of these articles. Dana, we're looking forward to your webinar.
Thank you, Denise, and welcome everyone. We're glad you're attending today's webinar on succession planning. Succession planning is one key element in your overall strategic planning process and is necessary to assure you have the talent available to populate your future. Let me start by telling a story about my own family's company. We did not really do an effective job of succession planning. Family members were judged both by their abilities and their family relationships. The result was not anywhere nearly as positive as it could have been with the advantage of 20/20 hindsight. We usually ended up with the right person in the right job, but without the background and experience that would have made the transition much cleaner. This is one reason why I am so interested in succession planning. What is succession planning? Succession planning is the process by which a company perpetuates itself by assuring there are candidates who are well qualified and well experienced so they may assume higher roles in the company as people retire, leave for other opportunities, or move further up the organization. Is succession planning only for top executives? Not anymore. Key positions in many different areas of the company likely should have succession plans. Succession planning is developed into a strong process which is aimed at developing internal talent at multiple levels throughout the company, with the goals of retention of key talents and having promotion paths for key talents. Results for many companies include better performance, raised morale, and improved profitability. Why do companies do succession planning? Companies have realized in the past they've done succession planning only for senior executives in case of retirement or career changes. The result was that it was likely that upcoming contributors at lower levels felt unappreciated, even though their contributions to the effectiveness of the company were key to the success of that company. When we look at the ages of our workforces today, over 60 million people, or about 40% of the workforce, will be ready to retire by 2020. This will result in a huge need for people who have been prepared to step into the places of these retirees at multiple levels of their organizations, not just at executive levels. Questions you need to ask in your own organization. What percentage of your employees will be retiring in the next 2 years? 5 years, 10 years? Do we have a process to identify people with the potential to move to higher level positions? How do we assess whether we're making progress in selecting and educating selected individuals for their future roles in the company? Can we identify those roles for candidates who may have to step into higher roles if an opening occurs? Do we have plans established in case a senior person leaves the company? Or do we have gaps in our personnel resources which should be addressed? Succession planning helps HR departments and companies manage an employee's career path. They encourage assessing the knowledge, experience, and potential of employees so that those with talent can be recognized early on. Once an employee has been targeted for possible inclusion in succession planning, a career path may be established which will give the employee exposure to appropriate jobs, education, and experiences, which should help prepare the employee for future promotion, increases in experience, and opportunities to grow into more responsible positions. One significant outcome of a successful program of succession planning is the likely retention of key talents while they learn and grow within the planned paths of their journey upward in the company. One other consideration, that if a company does not have the pool of talent within the organization due to good people seeking opportunities elsewhere because they see no upward career path, then the company will have to go outside to obtain the requisite talent to meet its needs for qualified replacements of key positions. This can be very expensive, with considerable risk based on the opportunity or the possibility that any given person from the outside may not work out, may not fit the culture of the company, or may not be a good match for the needs of the position they're hired to fulfill. Long-term, a succession plan for key talents will save both time and money for the company. Time is saved in that when an opening appears, there should be one or more people who have been groomed to take the next step into that opening. These people don't need time to become familiar with the culture of the company, the people within the company, and the processes they'll be expected to utilize to do their new jobs. Costs will be saved by not having to go outside for new talent. The company will not have to pay the headhunter fees, which can run from 20 to 40% plus expenses when someone from the outside is hired. In addition, by bringing someone up from within the company, openings are created at lower levels for others to move into, resulting in improved morale, better results due to the level of familiarity within the company, staff, and processes, and further opportunities for those who are key talents at lower levels within the company. Let me give you a good example of why companies should do a good job of planning for succession in key positions. CDW, the computer warehouse people, recently faced a unique challenge. The company had a large group of ready candidates for promotion. However, the internal succession and talent management program lacked the necessary process to encourage growth and establish strong leadership development for future coworkers. The solution was to avoid the financial and practical burden of full-blown talent searches outside the company. CDW implemented an internal succession management program using performance and talent management systems. CDW developed individual employee talent profiles with competencies, certifications, mobility, interests, career history, and goals. From there, the company built a detailed organizational depth chart that identified possible successors for every key position in the company. Finally, the recent emergence of ongoing talent reviews for employees at all levels of the company has helped reshape corporate thinking. Much like performance reviews, this process gives companies a qualitative snapshot of the talent pool, readiness of individual employees to step up to leadership roles, and since today's workforce is more transient than ever, it becomes critical to assess employees from both a talent and performance perspective, and openly provide career development opportunities to ensure the right people stay. What are the elements of succession planning? Effective succession planning should help your company, 1, assure continuity within the company, develop key talent in time to be prepared to meet future needs, retain key talent because they'll be able to see a path to the future with more responsibility and authority, assure an ongoing supply of people who are ready to take the next step upward in the company when the need arises. The first step in an effective succession plan is to actually define the processes we will follow to determine who is qualified to be included in a succession plan, what knowledge, skills they have, and where there are gaps. This rises to assessment. Assessment will determine the current capabilities of an employee, the foundation on which a career path will be built. Assessment should also include the determination of the company's future needs, so we have sufficient resources in place to fulfill those needs as they occur. Assessment will determine what is needed to continue individual personal development. By assessing the capabilities and the apparent gaps in knowledge and experience, a rational career path can be established for each key talent, which should lead people involved to be developing their knowledge, skills, and relationships needed for a career advancement. It will build a cadre of people who are becoming ready to move into positions of more authority. The outcome of the assessment phase should be a document which lists the capabilities, skills, and knowledge that each individual has garnered to that point in time. It should also list areas in which gaps are perceived, so the person may be given the experience in areas where there are gaps or provided education to close the gaps. This really should become an element of career path development for individuals. These documents should be regularly updated and revised as needed to track the progress of candidates, as well as to modify the future action steps needed to continue the development of each person. No two people learn at the same rate, and as such, flexibility must be built into the overall process in order to keep on track with each person. Once the process of identifying key employees and future needs is accomplished, the company should have a good picture of future needs as well as the potential of various individuals to have the abilities and experience necessary to fill higher level positions. The next step is to establish an individualized program for the identified talent to give them the education and experiences appropriate to their current capabilities and to their anticipated future roles in the company. Finally, monitor the progress of each person as they are making their way along their career path. Some people might not do well enough to continue in the original direction established for them. A plan should be determined as to what to do with them. Are there other paths they should take? Are they topped out in their progression? Should they continue with the company? These are hard questions, but decisions have to be made in the best interests of both the company and the individual. It is no favor to a person to allow him or her to continue with the company if there's not a good fit. What are the benefits of succession planning? Simply put, there are a number of distinct advantages to a company to do effective succession planning. Replacement for senior management at the appropriate time. Replacement for key positions throughout the company when needed. Retention of key people. Retention of knowledge within the company. Improved morale, improved processes and procedures, and eventually better profitability. The other side of the coin, what are the pitfalls? While the benefits of succession planning are many, there can be some pitfalls to consider. If you identify one person as a successor to a higher level position, other talented people may decide there's nowhere for them to move up, so they may leave. The solution to this is to not actually select the one person who will take a particular job when the current inhabitant leaves or is promoted too early in the process. By establishing objective criteria for upward movement in a company, but not actually naming the successor until the need really occurs, the company can retain qualified people. Even if one person is not named for a particular position, the fact that they've been prepared for upward movement may well qualify them for similar positions within the company, thus helping retain knowledge within the company, as well as the retention of a well-qualified person who may be able to take on other responsible positions within the company. By identifying one person as a successor to a key position, the company is locked into a particular path, and if the nominee doesn't pan out later on, the company may end up without a qualified individual to step in when the opening occurs. When the company is a privately held family group company or family company, are there additional factors which should be taken into consideration? The short answer is yes. I have good friends of mine here in Grand Rapids who were the fourth and fifth families, fourth generation and fifth generations of their family in a very successful business. I interviewed one of the fourth generation some years ago about how they went about doing succession planning for their company. These are the rules that they had literally written out many years ago, which governed their approach to the involvement of the next generation in the family business. Their first rule was that anyone who wanted to come into the company had to work for another company for a minimum of 5 years. Their second rule was that if a family member wanted to enter the business, he or she had to make a firm commitment by age 35. After then, there would be no opening for the individual. Their third rule was that once a family member came into the business, if he or she decided to leave, there would be no return available. That decision was final. One of the most difficult things to do in a closely held family company is to separate the personal lives of the family members from their professional lives. The principle I would strongly suggest here is, first, keep the two lives separate. Whenever possible, use non-family members to lead, train, and to criticize the process of the younger family members. Monitor the progress of the younger family members objectively, not being harder or easier on them than would be appropriate for a non-family member. Pay for the job, not the family relationship. Establish clearly what are the career paths are for each individual and clearly what is expected in each one. These would include the knowledge required, the skills required, the experience to be gained, that they would be mentored where possible by a non-family member, and what performance and what attitudes were expected. Do regular performance reviews. When changes are needed, make them in a professional manner, as would be done for any non-family member. Don't bring the family member into the inner circle until they've earned it. Don't bring them into any decision-making process where the family member's superior, especially if he's non-family, is not involved and responsible for helping make that decision. Three important points. Most important one last. Number 3, effective succession planning is a key part of strategic planning. The goal is to have resources available for key positions when the need arises. The result should be to have a quick, seamless transition when a change happens, so that the future of the enterprise is enhanced and the process is positive for both the individuals involved as well as the organization itself. It is not a simple nor a quick fix, but one which needs to be well designed and implemented with great forethought so the process accomplishes what it actually is aimed at accomplishing. Having the ability to transition from one person to the next in a well-planned, well-executed process which is positive for both individuals and the organization. One of the key elements of succession planning is to decide what are the key attributes the successor needs to have. It is not enough to have the attributes of the current person. What are the attributes that will be needed in the future? By having a clear strategy, you can see what the future leaders of the company will need to be good at, and that those attributes can be added to the succession plans of various leaders and leader candidates. The questions to ask yourself are, do we have a good strategic plan to live by? Is succession planning part of that plan? Does succession planning have its own action plans to enable the company to keep the best and brightest and have them ready to step in when needed? If you do not have a good strategic plan, you will not know what these new attributes should be, and you may end up developing people who have the attributes of good leaders in the 20th century, not for the 21st century. Now, many of you ask, how does one determine what skills may be needed in the future? I go back to my earlier point. You need an excellent strategic plan that gives you a roadmap where the company is going and what skills will be needed to get you there. For example, in the 20th century, your operations people may have been managing people in the USA. For the 21st century, you may need the skills of someone who can manage in a global operations environment. Marketing managers may need to be adept in social media. Design engineers may need to be adept at 3D printing. A good strategic plan will help you better define the skills needed in the future. So as a special bonus for those who attended this webinar, we'd like to make a special offer. We are offering a special price to attend our widely acclaimed seminar, Simplified Strategic Planning, of $9.95. It's regularly $18.95. Your link to register at this low price is valid through April 15, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. The link is shown there. Click on that or cut and paste, and it will take you to the registration page. If you're listening to an archived version of this presentation and want to attend the seminar, please call Elizabeth Ted, our seminar coordinator, at 734-995-3465. When you mention you have just listened to the Succession Planning Webinar Archive, she will give you a special webinar rate for the seminar. If you have any questions after the seminar and after we close, please contact me. My phone is 616-575-3193, or email me at baldwin@cssp.com. We can't teach strategic planning in an hour like this, but if your company would like to go to the webinar, we know it's well worth your time and money attending. Thank you all for attending this webinar. At this point, I will try to answer any questions you may have about succession planning, the process, and the results. Denise?
We've got a couple questions, so if you do have questions, if you could type them in the question box. But during the course of the presentation, a couple people typed some questions in. Okay, the first one. Why shouldn't companies go to headhunters to find a good candidate when an opening occurs?
Hang on 1 second. Well, number one, the problem with going to headhunters is you are bringing somebody in from the outside, and there are times when that is good. But there's a tremendous cost involved. Typically 20 to 40% or more of the position's compensation, total compensation, is the cost to have a headhunter find a qualified candidate. There's lost time. Other people in the company have to spend interviewing candidates, then reviewing results with the hiring team and HR. This is time consuming and takes job away from their normal jobs. And finally, familiarity with the company, the culture, and processes must be learned in order to be absorbed. This takes time, and not doing it well can have serious consequences.
Excellent. How deep in a company should a succession plan be developed? How deep should you go?
Well, every company is different, and it usually depends on the availability and cost to replace a key person. If there are easily available replacements, then the need to have that position included in a succession planning process is lower than if the position is more difficult to fill and if it requires any specialized knowledge. The answer is you should look at your company structure and determine where the needs will be and how readily you can fill the slot should a key person leave. Do you have internal talent, or do you have to go outside and get it? Those are some of the questions you have to answer in order to know whether or not somebody should be included in the succession planning part of the process.
Excellent. Here's another question. Why don't you recommend just designating a single successor? You had mentioned looking at a couple of people.
Yeah, normally you're wise to not designate a person unless there's a good reason to do so, in which case you need to go ahead. But you need to consider the situation, for example, in which you've invested a few years in educating a person for a key position, and that person gets tired of waiting and leaves. You have no immediate successor and must start over. Another concern is that other well-qualified people may feel shut out of the advancement track and then leave, or at least it might harm morale. And finally, what happens if the person doesn't pan out and is not ready to be promoted? You have no backup. Competition has its merits, and this is one of the areas where I think that should be taken into account.
Here's a new question. Father is 80, succeeding son is mid-50s, and has never been mentored to be CEO. Father doesn't believe son capable, though he probably is. How do you convince the strong father?
That's a fun one. I can relate to it. My father was about 10 years younger than that, and I was about 10 years younger than that, and had never really been mentored other than indirectly in the top management part of the business. Number one, what kind of education does the successor have? Does he have an MBA or any other graduate training? Number two, what kind of resources does he have? Can he talk with somebody like me who's could be an executive coach to help round him out, give him a sounding board so that his father can see that he's making steps in progress? And three, sitting down and going over what the requirements of the job are, where he has gaps, and how he's going to address changing those or filling those, crossing those gaps, so that when he gets to a certain point, he has met the standards that the father has set out.
Okay.
If you'd like to talk offline, I'd be happy to help with that too.
Okay, I've got another question here. In most cases, talent reviews include taking a look at critical roles. How would you advise or define a critical role to help the business leaders understand it?
Well, yeah, good question. The thing that again, you need to fit it into the overall approach of a systematic approach both in succession planning and succession planning as part of a strategic plan. The strategic plan basically outlines the 50,000-foot view of where you want to take the company. It's a long-range vision of where you want to go and how you want to get there. With that laid out, at least as well as we can do it today, and you're always working with some assumptions which are not facts, so that things are subject to change as the real world is encountered. You basically then set up what are the criteria for being in different positions. If you're going to be the chief operating officer, what does that take in your company? The CEO or president, a division manager. Each of those can have pretty distinct and well-defined position descriptions, which then can be analyzed to see where the individual has strengths and where he has some gaps. Then an approach to fill those gaps with experience and education and mentoring and coaching should be taken, so that we have a path to follow with for the individual, and that will end up with someone who is qualified to step into the next role.
Excellent. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to hold on for a minute, but we'd like to thank you all for attending this, and of course if you have additional questions specific to Dana, you have his contact information.